We're in our 4th season now using these grow bags for our main tomato production area. And one of the reasons we went with the fabric grow bags is they were just quite a bit more economical than using a black nursery container by about a third. These were about $5 a piece 4 years ago. And one of the main reasons we went with some of this raised gardening in these bags is because of the Colorado spruce that you see here. Those roots have started to completely invade our main production area where we grow a lot of our vegetables for the season. To get going on our 4th season, then you can see quite a bit of weeds have built up in here, different pigeon grass, lamb's quarter, even ragweed. So we're going to get that all pulled out of there. Let's go ahead and get you up to speed on how this all came together and what we're using for our main tomato production area. When I first got these bags, I thought, what ways can I cut cost not using so much soil? And I had recently done some tree pruning on these green ash branches. So I decided just to cut them up into smaller pieces, even some of the bigger trunks, and I put them in the bottom of these containers. And it's called a Hugelkultur procedure, where those tree trunks and branches will actually store some of the water. It also creates an airspace down there, so a great little spot for the root system to get into, and it's worked out super. Here's some footage from a couple years ago when I was filling some of those bags. Take a look at some of the different amendments we were using at that time. The mix that we used, we went ahead and we used about 1/3 topsoil, just a regular topsoil that I had delivered. You don't want to go with complete topsoil. It's going to get a little bit heavy. You want to break it up with something. We chose to use vermiculite. Vermiculite's a really common product in the horticultural field. We also did some sphagnum peat moss, which comes from the peat bogs. It's a sterile plant medium, has good soil moisture retention, loosens up that soil, very, very common in gardening. We also use something called Dakota peat, which is not a sphagnum peat, but a sedge peat. And the sedge peat, high in organic matter, it helps out with the nutrient transfer between the plant and the soil microorganisms. A great product. I've been using this now and I've really seen tremendous improvement in the things we're growing. When I first started hand filling these bags, it took a long time. So I set up this system where I used my little front end loader and hung them from the back of the wheelbarrow, and that way I was able to mix the amendments together with the bucket, and then I would just scoop in and pour it in. And then once they're full, they're quite heavy, so I just used the tractor and the front end loader to bring them all the way to my back garden area. So that's worked out fantastic. If you look closely here, then what I did was buy some cheaper fence posts. They're not a T-post, so they're pretty easy to get out of the ground. And I drilled pilot holes in all the fence posts, and then I used electrical fence wire. I don't have it electrified, but it's just a really good, durable wire, and ran that all the way through. So this becomes our trellis area for the tomatoes as they grow. We use this cheap little plastic clip that we tie the tomatoes, and that's our support system. We have quite a few cages on hand. That's probably a more common thing that you'll see people use for supporting your tomatoes. You don't want the tomatoes to be on the ground because you can get just a lot more disease potential. The tomatoes are also, they're probably going to rot if they're touching the ground. So this works great from year to year for a trellis system. For irrigation, what I've used, it's a spray stake primarily sold to the nursery industry, how they irrigate and water their trees. But I decided, well, why not just use it for watering tomatoes? This is where the water comes in the top, and if you're not going to be using them, then this is just a plug system right there. And the nice thing about this spray stake, the water comes out as a fan. So oftentimes I'll put it in on one side, and if it seems like we're getting pooling or not a good enough coverage, it's really easy just to quick move it over to the other side. But this one spray stake, yeah, that's enough to keep this hydrated throughout the whole season. So it's an automated system that I've got on an irrigation timer. We don't have to worry about hand watering. We experiment from year to year. This year I'm using a dehydrated chicken manure. It's an organic fertilizer, lower in the nutrient level, but the organic fertilizers are going to last a lot longer than some of the other fertilizers. If we notice a little bit of stress as the tomatoes start to grow or they're not performing, then we'll probably use a 10-10-10 fertilizer or something of that nature that's got a little bit more nutrient value. I've also been using these pine bark nuggets. You can buy it in bag form. Normally it's just sold using as a mulch on your beds, but this has actually worked pretty good to incorporate in to our soil mix. I think it provides that organic matter, creates airspace. This is a tool that I love to use for shallow mixing. We'll get everything kind of stirred up in here, make it easier to put our transplant in. We first highlighted this little tool when I put some potatoes in. Don't forget the garden claw. Yeah, every once in a while you get one of those goofy tools that just really does a nice job on something. That's what this thing does. Just perfect for doing that little bit of top mixing. Ooh, this will get your heart rate going first thing in the morning. We're going to put 2 tomato transplants per container. Our first season we did just 1, and you could certainly do that. You can plant tomatoes pretty deep. They'll root out on that stem, and that'll also provide support. We started these probably, I would say, a good 6 weeks ago, and I've had them on this cart. We bring them in and out over the last 3 to 4 weeks so they get acclimated, you know, to the cold, the wind, the sun. And that way those transplants, they don't have that shock if you buy them directly from a greenhouse. Sometimes they're going to have a tough time if you don't go through that hardening off process. We're lining them up right below these guy wires, so as that stem starts elongating and growing up, it'll provide that support. Something you can also do with a tomato, you can do what's called trench planting, where actually you can bury in this entire stem. So if you buy some elongated tomatoes at your garden store, they've just been in there for a while, you can lay it down just like that and just bend that tip up. That's a great way to plant tomatoes, and then you don't have this tall, spindly tomato trying to acclimate itself. For this purpose, we're just going to go straight down, and it'll root all along that stem. That just makes more sense. One other thing I'll mention is we've learned not to rush it in our area. We're Northern Great Plains, Zone 4. We can still get freezing weather, you know, all the way into the end of May. We also leave a couple containers for basil, which is a good companion plant that we grow in between some of the different tomatoes. So that's the process for our tomato production. That's all I've got for now. Thanks for watching Garden Hike. We'll see you again next video.